just how quickly things can get out of hand when you have a feature-rich application like the one you're looking at here, and you combine that with code that's not sufficiently tested. And in that case, I'll show you just how subtly and quickly bugs can arise. So we have this application right here, let's say, and I can go ahead and I can search for any stock. So inside this field here, I just type in Carvana as an example. I go ahead and click it and I see its profile. So Carvana has a score that has been generated. It has a bunch of criteria like price to book ratio and a bunch of other metrics that we see here. Now, what we can do is I can start ticking on and off some metrics. So I click off price to book. I click off price to cash, let's say. And as I'm doing this, notice how the score is changing. The score is changing as I tick on and off criteria. In other words, the user can choose which fundamentals they deem necessary to capture or to gauge a score of a stock. In other words, if I look at a stock, not all of the fundamentals I may care about. If I feel Carvana's debt is not relevant in the certain aspect that I'm looking at it, then I tick it off and the score changes. That's that. Now, what I want to test for here is, of course, we want to test for all this functionality. So when a user toggles something, I want to ensure that the score is being changed appropriately. But specifically here, I want to show you something. If the user were to tick off price to book and then refresh the page, watch this. Price to book, I should expect to stay ticked off. In other words, I want my state to be preserved. So let's go ahead and see what can happen if the code that handles the preserving of the URL state is not sufficiently tested, just how quickly things can get out of hand. So the code for this is as follows right here. This is the component that handles the page that you just saw. Now we have a bunch of functions here, and they're all tested, but suppose they were not tested. Suppose a developer comes in and they make a change here. They change this button, toggle checked inner function right here. Toggle checked inner, all that does is it toggles the checked state of an inner criteria like price to book ratio, for example. What happens here is, at the end of the day, if they toggle, I want to update certain states in my application, as I'm highlighting here, and then I want to obviously update the query parameters, what you see on the URL fields, such that when you refresh the page, the state is maintained. The buttons that are ticked off, and the ones that are on, stay on. That's that. Suppose a developer comes in though, and they remove this line of code. It's deleted. Inadvertently or not, it's gone. Okay, now I want to show you just how subtle our bug can be right here. So if I were to just go ahead and refresh, I want to start from scratch, just give you a clean start right here. I want to just type in Carvana once again, and we're going to get into what's going on here. So let's just say I were to tick off price to book. I were to tick off market cap and so on. Look at this. The stock, the app looks like it's working, right? Because the score is changing based on which metrics I am ticking on and off. But there is a subtle bug here that we don't know about. Because notice, as I am ticking things on and off, nothing is happening in this URL. Therefore, when I refresh the page, my state is not maintained. If I were to click off price to book, refresh the page, I should see price to book ticked off, but it's not. Right? So there is a bug here that is not caught if we don't have sufficient tests. Now, I'm going to just show you the tests for this. I've actually written a number of tests. You have 25 tests here I've written, where one of them is failing. Change params on toggle of metric. The very specific bug that captures the feature that we were just looking at, that test failed right here. It failed because this line was taken away. The handle query params, that line right there. So what is this test? Let's go ahead and check this test out. Change params on toggle of metrics. It's a very simple test. I'm essentially creating a history. This is a URL history. I'm initializing my state. I am mocking my store. I am rendering my component. I am getting the radio button for price to book, let's say. I am then toggling that button. I am simulating an action, a click event on that button. And here is a line right here. At this point, I expect the params, the URL params included fundamentals to equal some JSON object. Now, what that object is less important here. That's not relevant here. But the fact is, I expect it to equal a JSON object that, when refreshed, I should see, obviously, my state preserved. So I were to go back here to the code here, to the way it should be. And then we were to go back in here. I were to tick off price to book. Notice how the state, the URL parameters changes. And then I refresh this page right here. And the price to book is ticked off. The state has been preserved. So if this feature were not tested for, then when a developer comes in and they remove this, let's say inadvertently, they remove this, they would not get a failed test, as you're about to see right now. They would not get a failed test. Therefore, their changes would be pushed, and the bug would not be caught until a user complains. So I hope this video highlights just how easily, just how quickly things can get out of hand when you combine a feature-rich application with code that's not sufficiently tested. And that's that.